Look, let's head towards our top story this morning. And the Prime Minister has asked ministers to do everything in their power to ensure the release of two British men sentenced to death in the separatist region of Donetsk.
Yeah, they're Aidan Aslin and Sean Pinner, and they were found guilty of mercenary activities and committing actions aimed at seizing power and overthrowing the constitutional order of the DPR. That's the Democratic People's Republic of Donetsk, or the Donetsk People's Republic.
Well, meanwhile, Ukraine's foreign minister says they're going to work with Britain to ensure the release of those two men, apparently.
Yes, well, for more, we're joined by political reporter Bill Bowkett. Hello there, Bill, again.
Hi.
Yeah, and we were asking earlier, what on earth can they do? But Boris Johnson has entreated his ministers to do everything they can. It's a bit of a brush off that, though, isn't it? He's sort of saying, I don't know what to do, you do whatever you can.
Yeah, I mean, soft power is one thing, the power of language, of course, but as we know, having to negotiate with Russia, even prior to the war in Ukraine, was nigh on impossible. However, there are some solutions that are being proposed to this. One is potentially leads on to the precedent set by Nadine Zaghari-Ratcliffe in potentially paying a fee. Also, the fact that the UK has the backing of the United States, and further sanctions could be imposed on Russia, which they don't want to go by given the economic damage and toll that's already been caused. But what's seen as the most likely solution, and this was touted by Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, and also Robert Jenrick, former cabinet minister, who one of these prisoners of war as his constituency MP, says a prisoner swap. People that are currently detained in Ukraine, Russian.
And apparently there is one that President Putin is particularly interested in getting back.
Yes, I can't remember, but I think it's...
basically a friend of his.
No, I know the person you talk about. He was a highbrow politician, and he's also an oligarch as well, made lots of his funds from there. But I think it's 5 people, which I think the Russians are currently asking for a potential swap. For the release, these two British.
I mean, the money issue would be problematic, wouldn't it? With Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, we did historically owe a lot of money to Iran,
yes.
So it sort of settled that debt. Whereas this would just be a ransom, in effect, which surely the government would never do.
No, they wouldn't, and they don't want to play into Putin's hand further in this as well. And given the economic damage that's already been caused by the war in Ukraine here in the United Kingdom and the rate of inflation, would we want to spend, millions of pounds? I think with Zaghari-Ratcliffe, it was close to 330 million pounds. Would we want to do the same?
Which, frankly, arguably, we always owed them.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. And she also wasn't under threat of death.
No,
whereas these guys are.
Yes, and for what seems as illegitimate reasons, because these guys are combatants. They've actually allegedly lived in Ukraine for quite a few
they are
years.
members of the Ukrainian army,
exactly.
Aren't they? They're not individuals, they're not mercenaries.
No, they're not. They're fighting alongside Ukrainians in their struggle for freedom. But Russia thinks that they count them as mercenaries, and as a result, they've sentenced to death. And I think they have, 25 days left to appeal. And if they don't, then sadly...
But because this is a sham court in a sham People's Republic.
Yes.
The fact they have been left alive to this point and not sort of summarily executed, the fact that there is this sort of grace period for appeals or whatever else, does seem to indicate that they do want some sort of compromise, that they are willing to talk about something. And so if it is that sort of prisoner swap, well, there is some hope for the families there.
Yeah, there is. And the wife of one of them is appealed directly for this to occur. And actually, by doing this, it further legitimises that region of Donetsk.
Yes.
Because by what we saw in February, just before the conflict began, where they had that illicit referendum and they declared that they are now an independent state from the Ukraine, it is now just going to feel as though that they have the upper hand in this particular instance, because what else is there really to do in order to guarantee their safety and their life?
And the person that you would rely on to negotiate, hopefully, would be Liz Truss, who was the very person who was entreating Brits to go out and fight with the Ukrainian army.
I know, which then she had to revert back and deny, and other ministers...
So it's horrendously embarrassing as well as awkward.
And she was in... within cabinet, there were massive squabbles over this. Her and the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace Ben Wallace was like urging Brits, do not go over there. It's not safe. The situation there is dire.
Yesterday, I mean, looking at other issues for the Prime Minister, we had the Rwanda ruling at the Royal Courts of Justice. A group was trying to sort of block these flights, the deportation flights. Now, they failed in that. The first flight should be going ahead on Tuesday. However, it's emerged that the Prince of Wales is not happy with it. He's called it an appalling scheme.
There's many ways you can criticise the Rwanda, the pilot, the £120 million pilot. Those on the left say it would be inhumane. It goes against European Convention on Human Rights, Refugee Convention. Whereas people on the other side, political spectrum, saying, well, it's a waste of taxpayers' money and it's not actually going to deter asylum seekers from reaching the UK. And Prince Charles has expressed that in a private capacity. So somehow this has managed to leak out of Buckingham Palace. And I think the worry about this, having read the story, is the fact that trust in the monarchy, given the marvellous Jubilee celebrations that we have, trust in the monarchy is kind of frail, and the popularity of Prince Charles is not as great, as given that he is going to be our new head of state and king eventually in the future. So if they're going to maintain that, have that central authority, and make sure that legitimacy lies, in the bicameral legislative system that we have in this country, in the House of Lords and the House of Commons, then really comments like these shouldn't be taken out. But of course, having get the coverage that it has, it's not looking good on the side of the Home Office.
No, I mean, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because, I mean, Charles may not like it. A fair number of people, some of you at home, may not like it. But it has been deemed legal by the High Court. And an awful lot of voters do support it as a move, and it's trying to tackle immigration one way or another.
Exactly, and maybe one way in which Boris Johnson is able to win back trust is through red meat policies, and immigration is such a key issue in which they voted for the Tory party back in 2019, and also why they voted Brexit. In conjunction with that. So, yes, and obviously with the ruling, it's they concluded that it's actually down to the individual cases rather than the scheme as a whole. So what we might have in a situation where the flights go ahead on Tuesday, but then these individuals have their appeal, and then they have to come back to the UK and then have to be processed through the UK border force.
A lot of the problem is that we still think of Rwanda, when we think of the name Rwanda, we still think of genocide.
Of course.
And a hellhole of a place.
Yes.
And there are beginning to be stories coming up in the newspapers today, particularly in the Tory newspapers, suggesting that Rwanda isn't like that at all. And of course, Prince Charles is going there for a big meeting in Kigali, that maybe we need to re-educate ourselves about what Rwanda is actually like.
Yes, there's going to be that meeting of the G20, I think, over there in a couple of days' time. And of course, Paul Kagame, the president over there, he has had mounting criticism over potential human rights abuses, censorship of the media. But in this ruling that we had in the Royal Courts of Justice, it's deemed as a safe third world country, which is the requirements needed, under different conventions for asylum seekers to safely go from one country to another. And as Ella mentioned earlier when she was doing the newspaper reviews, that similar systems in place within the European Union. You have a country like Austria, who had their trial, now urging the European Union to implement a similar system.
How then, just on that note, how if that is the case, if this is being used across a number of EU countries, how then did they go to court yesterday arguing that it was a breach of the EU Human Rights Convention?
It's because to them it's not deemed as a safe country, a safe third world country, because of the human rights abuses and also because of treatment of certain groups, particularly the LGBT community, and to, under convention, people would say that actually Britain is a safe country and that is their entry or destination, so why aren't they able to stay in here? But, as we've seen, different systems in place, and if they want to take it further, they'll have to take it on the individual level, and if they want to go even further than that over this juncture, then they would have to potentially go even higher up through the European courts. So, yeah, we'll just have to wait and see.
Bill, great to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.